caught my wife with a karate star. He regretted it when I showed up. He laughed first, thinking he was untouchable. But the moment I confronted him, everything changed. I always thought I knew my wife. The way she laughed at my jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about our future, the quiet, almost sacred trust we had built over 5 years. We were that couple people envied. At least that's what everyone said. But appearances can be deceiving, and I learned that the hard way. It all started with small things. A phone left face down on the counter, a laugh she tried too hard to suppress when texting, late nights at the gym she swore were extra training sessions. At first, I shrugged them off. I'm an MMA fighter, and life is chaotic enough without overanalyzing every tiny behavior. But the feeling, that pit in my stomach that whispers something isn't right, kept gnawing at me. Then came Instagram. It started innocuously, a tag post here, a story there. But soon I noticed the patterns. She was commenting on a particular account, some young, arrogant karate blogger, posting flashy videos and boasting about his so-called discipline and skills. At first, I tried to dismiss it. I've been in fights that left people begging for mercy. Who was this guy, really, but some internet bragger in a GI? One evening, I came home early from the gym, exhausted but craving my wife's company. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I saw it. Her phone on the couch, screen glowing, messages open. He was there, the karate blogger, and they were laughing. Intimate laughter. Text that should never exist between a husband and wife. My blood ran cold. My fists itched, not for the gym, but for her, and maybe for him. I sat there, silent, watching her unaware, reading the words that shattered my trust. But I didn't confront her immediately. MMA has taught me patience, focus, control. I needed clarity. I needed proof beyond a screenshot. I followed the signs, the late-night runs, the strange training sessions. And then, one night, it all came to a head. I decided to go to the dojo he claimed was his sacred space, the place he flexed, fought, and boasted online. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I knew. I had to see it with my own eyes. The dojo smelled of sweat, resin, and the faint bitterness of ego. The place was empty except for him, demonstrating a high kick with an intensity that screamed arrogance. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice low, steady, controlled. Looking for someone? I asked. He turned. The confidence in his eyes faltered when he recognized me. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. This was the beginning of a reckoning. The moment his eyes met mine, I could feel the weight of every lie she had whispered between us. He tried to smile, a cocky half grin, like I was just some jealous husband overreacting. But I didn't move. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch like a blade across the room. The gym's fluorescent lights reflected off the polished wooden floors, highlighting the tension in his stance. He was trained, disciplined, karate-ka through and through, but so was I, and I wasn't here for etiquette. You shouldn't be here, he said finally, his voice tight but trying to hold authority. I think I should be, I replied evenly, feeling my pulse slow, my mind calculating. Especially since my wife has been visiting you more than she visits me. For a split second, I saw it. Flashes of fear, the arrogance faltering. And that tiny flicker was enough to ignite a new feeling inside me. Control. I could hurt him. Not just physically, but emotionally in ways he couldn't anticipate. My hands itched to strike, but my head reminded me of the long game. MMA isn't just about power. It's about precision. And I intended to make him regret every step he took toward her. He took a half step forward, fists raised, assuming I was here to fight. But I didn't move. Instead, I stepped closer, slow, deliberate, letting him feel the distance shrink until we were almost face to face. You know, I said quietly, you're not as untouchable as your videos make you seem. His jaw tightened. Careful, he warned, but the edge in his voice betrayed uncertainty. I smiled, a sharp, controlled smile, the kind that comes from years of fighting in cages where the audience screams and stakes are life or humiliation. No, I said, careful is the last thing you should be, because you don't know me, and you don't know what she'll lose when I decide to act. He laughed nervously, shifting his stance, trying to regain composure. But there was a crack in the armor, his confidence faltering. I could see it, smell it, taste it in the charged air of that dojo. And I knew I had him. Before either of us could make another move, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from her, my wife. The words on the screen were casual, almost innocent. Had a great session tonight. See you at home. But beneath that, I could see everything, the betrayal, the lies, the laughter he thought was private. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because right then, I realized something crucial. The fight wasn't just here, in this room, between me and him. The real battle was going to be the one that exposed everything. The lies, the arrogance, and the audacity to think they could get away with it. I stepped back, letting the tension hang in the room. Enjoy your training, I said, my voice calm, but every word a promise. Because when you least expect it, your world is going to change. He stared, frozen, unsure if I meant physically or something far worse. And for the first time, I saw fear, not just respect, but fear. I left the dojo that night with a storm inside me, a mixture of anger, hurt, and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The streets were quiet as I drove home, the hum of the engine echoing my racing thoughts. I kept replaying every detail, the way he shifted when I spoke, the flicker of fear in his eyes, the smug confidence that had evaporated in seconds. He thought he was untouchable. He wasn't. When I got home, the house was dark, but I knew she was inside. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the wall clock, and beneath it all, the unmistakable tension that comes from guilt. I didn't rush. I didn't scream. I've learned that confrontation is most effective when patience is weaponized. She appeared in the doorway, a casual smile plastered across her face. "You're home late," she said, a tone that tried to sound innocent but cracked under the weight of her deception. "I saw you tonight," I said calmly, letting the words sink like lead into the space between us. Her smile faltered. "Saw me?" "Yes. With him." I didn't name names. She knew who I meant. The silence that followed was deafening. She tried to hide it, tried to speak, but I cut her off with a hand raised. "Don't. Just don't." Her eyes welled, but not with guilt. She was calculating, thinking of excuses, lies, explanations. I've seen that look before in fights and negotiations. People always believe they're smarter than the storm heading their way. I moved closer, calm, measured, letting the fury simmer beneath a veneer of control. "I'm not angry," I said, my voice low, almost intimate. "Not yet, but I am disappointed. And disappointed is far more dangerous than angry." Her lips trembled. "Alex, it's not what you think." "Stop." I took a step closer, my presence heavy, deliberate. "You think he means something to you? You think you can throw away everything we built for him? For his Instagram followers and his kicks?" Her gaze dropped, a shadow of shame flickering, but I knew it was too little, too late. The betrayal had been made, and the decision to act had already formed in my mind. MMA taught me strategy, patience, precision. This wasn't about fists. This was about exposing everything, showing the consequences of choices made in selfishness and lust. I left her there, standing in the dim light of the hallway, and went to plan. Every detail mattered. The dojo, his habits, her texts, their meeting spots. I traced their pattern for weeks, watching silently, gathering the evidence that would not just confront them, but make them regret their arrogance, their audacity, their betrayal. And deep down, a part of me thrilled at the thought that when the time came, they would never see it coming. Not just the confrontation, but the exposure, the reversal. The Karate Cop blogger had thought he was untouchable. He hadn't met me yet. The next few days were a calculated dance. I kept my routine the same, training at the gym, teaching classes, going through the motions of my life. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. Every social media post, every story, every tag and comment between her and him was documented. I wasn't reckless. I knew patience would be my weapon. Then came the turning point. One evening, while she was supposedly at her friend's dinner, I followed her to a quiet cafe on the edge of town. There he was, waiting, confident, unaware, arrogant as ever. She slid into the seat across from him, laughing in a way that made my chest tighten, not with jealousy, but with fury. I stayed in the shadows, watching. Every gesture, every shared laugh, every casual touch was fuel. And then I noticed it, the arrogance, the lack of awareness. He was bragging about a new seminar he was going to host, boasting about his followers, his discipline, how people admired him for his skills. I could see the smugness radiating off him, and I knew that arrogance would be his undoing. I didn't confront him then. That would be impulsive. I needed the perfect moment, the moment that would expose not just his arrogance, but her betrayal in a way they couldn't deflect. My mind raced through scenarios: public exposure, private confrontation, a direct challenge that forced him to face consequences he hadn't imagined. Later that night, I confronted her at home. She tried the excuses again, the soft apologies, the tears. I didn't allow them. I showed her the evidence, the messages, the stories, the schedule of their meetings. Her facade crumbled, and for the first time, I saw fear. Not just guilt, but real fear. You think you can fix this with words? I asked calmly. You think saying, "I'm sorry," erases what you've done? She shook, tears streaking her face, but I saw the calculation behind the fear. She knew I could hurt him, yes, but she also knew I could destroy what she thought was safe, the illusion of her affair. That's when the plan solidified in my mind. I would confront him on his terms, in his dojo, but not with brute force. I would use the truth, the exposure, the humiliation that he never considered possible. And when he fell, she would see the consequences of her choices as clearly as I did. I spent the next week preparing, mentally rehearsing the confrontation. I reviewed his online videos, noting his habits, his stance, his preferred moves. MMA had trained me to read opponents, to anticipate reactions, and I was ready. This wasn't about fighting for pride. It was about avenging the betrayal that had invaded my life, about taking control of a situation that should never have been theirs to play with. And then, the night came. I arrived at the dojo later than usual, letting the evening shadows cloak my approach. The parking lot was empty except for his sleek car, headlights off, as if he already considered himself untouchable. Inside, the smell of sweat and would hit me immediately, along with the echo of kicks striking bags of mats. He was alone, practicing, oblivious to the storm about to enter his carefully controlled world. I stepped inside silently, letting the floorboards announce me subtly, like a predator testing the waters. He glanced up, recognition hitting immediately. That cocky smirk? Gone, replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. Back again, he asked, trying to mask it with bravado, his stance rigid, fists half raised. Yeah, I said, voice calm, every syllable deliberate. Back to settle things properly. He laughed nervously. Settle things? You're not even in my league. I smiled, but it wasn't the friendly kind. It was the calculated, cold smile of someone who's been patient, watching, preparing. You think this is about leagues? I asked. This is about betrayal, about disrespect, about thinking you could take something sacred and make it yours. He lunged forward suddenly, trying to catch me off guard with a quick strike. I dodged easily, stepping to the side, letting his momentum carry him forward. He underestimated me. I didn't just train my body, I trained my mind, and I was ready. Do you really think you're invincible? I asked, circling him, letting the tension build. You laughed at me online, at her, but the difference between us isn't skill alone. It's control, and I've had enough of your arrogance. He spun, kicking at me, but I sidestepped again, the motion fluid, almost effortless. Each misstep he made wasn't just physical. It was an emotional unraveling. Every time he faltered, I could see the fear creeping in, the recognition that he had miscalculated, that he had underestimated the consequences. I stopped him with a firm hand on his chest, holding him steady. Look at me, I said. This isn't about proving strength. This is about making you see what betrayal costs. You didn't just take her time. You took my trust, my peace, my life. And you'll pay for it in the only way that matters to you. He swallowed hard, sweat dripping from his brow, eyes wide, realizing that this wasn't just a sparring session. This was a reckoning. He had believed himself untouchable, And now, every arrogant move he had made online, every smug post, every laugh he shared with her, it all came crashing down. And then I delivered the final strike. Not a punch, not a kick, but the truth spoken coldly and without hesitation. "She's leaving you," I said, "and nothing you do now can fix it." For the first time, I saw panic, raw and unguarded. He staggered, not from pain, but from understanding the full weight of his mistakes. And that was when I knew the storm had truly begun. The panic in his eyes was intoxicating, a mixture of fear, confusion, and the dawning realization that he had played with forces far stronger than himself. I didn't strike again. I didn't need to. Every word, every measured step I took toward him was a reminder that control had shifted entirely. "You think you're a master because of followers, likes, and flashy kicks," I said, my voice low, deliberate. "But mastery isn't about showing off. It's about respect. And you've disrespected me, my home, my life. And now," I paused, letting the words hang like a guillotine, "now you'll understand the consequences." He swallowed hard, backing up instinctively, and I could see him recalculating, trying to find a way out, a way to salvage his ego. But there was no exit. His world was narrow, built on illusions of skill and charm, and I was about to expose the cracks. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots. Every message, every image, every indication that she had been meeting him behind my back. His eyes flicked nervously to each one, then back to me, then to the mats beneath our feet. Panic seeped in. "She chose you?" he asked, voice trembling. "No," I said coldly. "She chose herself. She chose lies over honesty, deception over love. And the choice she made has consequences for both of us." He tried to speak, to justify, to deflect, but I stopped him with a calm hand gesture. I wasn't here for excuses. I was here to make him confront reality, to feel the weight of every arrogant move he thought he could get away with. Then came the sound of a car outside. Her car. She had returned. I knew she had to see this, the culmination of her betrayal laid bare. She walked in, expecting perhaps a casual argument, a slap of remorse, a shallow apology. Instead, she found the dojo tense, the air heavy, the fear on his face palpable. "Alex," she started, but I didn't allow her to speak. "You've been caught," I said to her, turning to the man. "Caught in your lies. And you," I said, voice hardening, "will regret ever thinking you could take what wasn't yours." She froze, realizing that the world she had carefully manipulated for weeks was collapsing. The Karate Cop blogger's smugness was gone, replaced by terror, and she finally understood the depth of her mistake. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. Control, patience, and precise execution were far more devastating than violence ever could be. And in that silence, with all three of us standing in the dim glow of the dojo lights, I felt a bitter satisfaction settle over me. The betrayal had been revealed. The arrogant had been humbled. And she, for the first time, truly understood that her choices had consequences she could never undo. Her eyes darted between us, panic and guilt warring with the defiance she still tried to hold on to. I could see her calculating, wondering if she could talk her way out of this, spin it into something she could survive. But she had misjudged me. I wasn't here for arguments or explanations. I was here for closure and justice. "I can't believe you let this happen," I said quietly, my voice cold but steady, each word deliberate. "You knew the line. You knew what was sacred, and you crossed it anyway." Her lips trembled, and for the first time, I noticed the exhaustion behind her eyes, the realization that the life she had carefully curated with lies was collapsing. "Alex, please," she started, but I didn't let her finish. "I warned him," I said, turning slightly toward the Karate Cop blogger. "I told him that betrayal comes with consequences. And now, you've seen what happens when arrogance meets reality." He nodded nervously, silent, the fight drained from his posture. For weeks, he had believed himself untouchable, and now he realized that skill and bravado were meaningless when measured against integrity and the consequences of your actions. I looked back at her. "Do you understand what you've done?" I asked. Her gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet mine. This isn't just about cheating. It's about trust, about respect, about the choices you made thinking there would be no repercussions. The room was heavy with tension. Every breath felt thick, every second stretched. I could feel the shift. The power had moved entirely. I wasn't just the wronged husband anymore. I was the orchestrator of accountability, the one who exposed the lies, and the one who would ensure that both of them understood the damage they had caused. I don't know what I expected, she whispered, barely audible. I don't know. I thought I could have both. You can't, I said firmly. Not when one is built on deceit. Not when one is built on arrogance and lies. Choices have consequences. You're learning that now. The Karateka blogger swallowed, visibly shaken, while she slumped against the wall, her facade finally crumbling. I realized in that moment that the storm I had been holding back had already arrived. I didn't need to raise my fists. The confrontation, the exposure, and the controlled reckoning were far more devastating than any fight could ever be. And yet, even as the room settled into a tense silence, I knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning of their reckoning, the start of consequences that would ripple far beyond the walls of this dojo. The days after the dojo confrontation were a haze of calculated strategy. I didn't let emotions rule me. Every move was deliberate, every action precise. I knew the most painful weapon wasn't violence. It was exposure, humiliation, and the slow dismantling of their sense of invincibility. I began with the Karateka blogger. I contacted some of his sponsors, subtly hinting at inconsistencies in his posts, his behavior, the rumors swirling online about his personal life. He started receiving messages, questions, veiled warnings from people he considered allies. His confidence began to erode. I watched as the carefully built persona of a disciplined, untouchable martial artist began to crack under the weight of whispers and doubt. At the same time, I confronted her in ways she couldn't ignore. I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations. I simply presented the reality of her choices, step by step. I documented their meetings, the deception, the lies. I showed her exactly how fragile her constructed world was, how easily it could collapse. She reacted the way guilty people often do, first with denial, then with anger, and finally with the bitter taste of fear. She realized that this wasn't about forgiveness. This was about accountability. Every smile she thought was secret, every laugh she believed private, was now laid bare. I kept the psychological pressure high. Subtle reminders in conversations, hints dropped casually when friends were around, the occasional text that made her pause and question if I knew more than I revealed. Every day, I watched her shrink under the weight of exposure. She couldn't manipulate me, couldn't hide, couldn't escape. And then there was him. The Karateka blogger began avoiding me at first, then nervously messaging, trying to reason, apologize, or explain. I responded sparingly. Each reply carefully measured to increase tension, to remind him that the arrogance he once relied on was gone. He was trapped, not physically, but emotionally, forced to face the consequences of his reckless indulgence. I realized the real satisfaction wasn't in a fight, or even in their fear. It was in control, in the orchestration of a reckoning they had never anticipated. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but the slow unraveling of their illusions, the realization that they had miscalculated entirely, that was priceless. And as I watched them squirm, both together and apart, I felt the bitter thrill of justice delivered with precision. This was not vengeance for pleasure. It was a reclaiming of my life, my dignity, and my future. And neither of them would forget it. The perfect opportunity came sooner than I expected. He announced a local seminar, a showcase of his discipline and skill. A small crowd, all eager to witness the Karateka blogger in action, unaware that the stage was about to shift. I knew this was my moment, not just to confront him, but to make his arrogance crumble before an audience, to strip away the image he had so carefully built. I arrived early, blending in as a spectator, observing his routine, his theatrics, the smug satisfaction radiating off him as he demonstrated forms and techniques. He was confident, practiced, flawless on the surface, But beneath that polish was vulnerability, and I intended to expose it. When the seminar began, he executed each move with precision. Every kick and block met with polite applause. But then I approached him in front of the crowd, calm and deliberate, like a shadow stepping into the light. Whispers ran through the audience, tension crackling in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying, controlled, firm, "you're watching a man who has deceived many, including someone very close to me." I held up my phone, showing images, texts, and evidence of the affair. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs rose, disbelief and shock spreading like wildfire. He froze, his practiced calm shattered. What is this?" he stammered, attempting to maintain composure, but the fear was clear, raw, undeniable. I turned to her, who had followed me quietly, hoping to witness my public exposure of him. Her face drained of color, a mixture of shame, fear, and realization. "You thought no one would ever see? That your lies were invisible?" I asked her, voice sharp but controlled. "You underestimated the consequences of betrayal. And now everyone does." The audience was silent, eyes flicking between us, the truth laid bare. His arrogance, once a shield, had become a cage. He stammered, tried to justify, but every explanation was drowned out by the evidence and the incredulous looks of those watching. For the first time, he understood fully. Confidence without integrity is meaningless. Skill without respect is hollow. And deception, no matter how well hidden, has a way of coming to light. Her gaze met mine, pleading, but there was no turning back. I had orchestrated the perfect exposure. They had thought they controlled the narrative, that their secret was untouchable. Now, stripped of illusions, they faced reality, a public reckoning they would never forget. The aftermath of the seminar was brutal, but not physically. The Karateka blogger faced whispers, judgment, and a sudden erosion of credibility. Sponsors quietly withdrew, followers questioned his integrity, and his carefully curated persona crumbled overnight. I watched from the sidelines, letting every moment unfold, savoring the precise balance of justice and exposure. She, on the other hand, was unraveling privately. At first, she tried to maintain composure, brushing off the humiliation as though it were a minor inconvenience. But in our quiet moments, when no one was watching, the cracks appeared. She started apologizing, not the shallow, manipulative apologies I had grown accustomed to, but genuine, raw admissions of guilt. I didn't think it would. I didn't think it would hurt this much. She confessed one evening, voice trembling, eyes filled with regret. I thought I could have both. I thought I could get away with it. I didn't respond immediately. I let the words hang, heavy like a weight pressing down on both of us. "You made a choice," I said finally, calm but cutting. "And every choice has consequences. You thought only he would pay the price. You were wrong." She lowered her gaze, shame overtaking defiance. For the first time, I felt a bitter mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction because justice had been delivered, but sorrow because someone I once loved had betrayed me so completely. Meanwhile, he attempted to reach out, messages and calls begging for forgiveness, promising he would make amends, offering excuses. I ignored them all. Each attempt was a reminder that arrogance and deceit are powerless against accountability. He had learned his lesson, not through physical defeat, but through exposure, humiliation, and the undeniable truth of his actions. In the silence of my apartment that night, I reflected on everything. Betrayal isn't just a moment. It's a series of decisions, a path you choose that leads to consequences. And sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is not with fists or anger, but with strategy, patience, and the cold clarity of truth. By the end of the week, both of them had been forced to confront the fallout in ways they hadn't imagined. His reputation, once untouchable, was fractured. Her trust, once given freely, was gone, not just from me, but from herself. And I, standing in the quiet aftermath, understood something essential. The storm I had wielded had been precise, calculated, and final. The tension between us didn't evaporate immediately. Even after the public exposure, the air between us remained charged, heavy with unspoken words, resentment, and the remnants of broken trust. I could feel her watching me, every movement, every expression, trying to read what I felt, what I planned next. But there was no fear in me, only control. One evening, she finally confronted me in the living room, her voice trembling but defiant. "Alex, what now? What do you want from me?" I leaned back, folding my arms, my eyes steady on hers. "I don't want anything from you," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I want you to understand the weight of your choices. I want you to grasp that betrayal isn't a moment. It's a chain of decisions, each one breaking trust, respect, and love." Her face fell. For the first time, I saw the realization of true loss, the understanding that no apology could fix the rupture she had caused. I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "It doesn't matter what you thought. You made a choice, and now you live with the consequences. Not just with him, not just with me, but within yourself." She sank into the couch, defeated, tears spilling freely. The arrogance she had worn like armor was gone, replaced by remorse and fear. I didn't speak for a long moment. Silence became the heaviest instrument of judgment, each tick of the clock reinforcing the finality of what had happened. Then I said quietly, almost to myself, "Some people need to learn the hard way that respect and loyalty aren't optional. They're the foundation of everything. Without them, everything crumbles." She nodded slowly, unable to meet my eyes, the weight of her choices pressing down. And in that moment, I realized the true power of patience and strategy. Not brute force, not anger, but the deliberate unfolding of truth. The storm had passed, but the imprint remained, permanent, undeniable, and transformative. Outside, the night was still, the city lights casting faint reflections through the window. Inside, I felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow, the clarity of justice tempered by the bitter cost of betrayal. And I knew that, from this moment forward, I would never allow anyone to treat trust so lightly again. The weeks that followed were strange, an uneasy calm settling over what had once been chaos. The Karate Cop blogger disappeared from social media. His posts vanished, sponsors gone, and the people who once admired him whispering doubts and rumors. I heard from mutual friends that he was barely holding it together, humiliated and isolated. His arrogance had been his downfall, and I had orchestrated it without throwing a single punch. She, however, remained close yet distant. Our interactions were measured, cautious, heavy with the memory of what had happened. I noticed her flinching when certain topics came up, her avoidance of eye contact, and the subtle way she tried to regain my approval in mundane tasks. But I wasn't interested in reconciliation, not yet. The lessons she had to learn were deeper than forgiveness. She had to understand the magnitude of her choices, the fragility of trust, and the power of consequences. At night, I trained harder than ever. MMA had always been a discipline, a way to hone strength and focus. But now it became therapy, a way to channel lingering anger, disappointment, and the restless energy that betrayal leaves behind. Each punch, each kick, each drill reinforced my control, not just over my body, but over the situation, over my emotions, and over the aftermath of their deceit. One evening, she approached me quietly, hesitant. "Alex, I've been thinking," she said softly. Her voice had lost its old confidence, replaced by a sincerity that was almost painful to witness. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to understand. I want to learn, not just from you, but from myself." I studied her carefully. The anger I had carried was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now there was a flicker of something else, a desire for accountability, a recognition of wrongdoing. "Understanding is a start," I said slowly. "But it takes more than words. It takes actions, consistency, and a willingness to face reality without excuses." She nodded, absorbing the weight of my words. For the first time, I saw her truly see herself. Not the version she presented to the world, but the flawed, human version that made choices she now regretted. It was a small step, but a crucial one. And as I watched her process, I realized something important. Revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about clarity, about illuminating the consequences of choices so clearly that they can't be ignored. The Karate Cop blogger had learned it publicly. She was learning it privately. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. The public spectacle, the humiliation, the confrontation, all of it had left scars, but also clarity. I noticed subtle changes in her, a quieter demeanor, more thoughtfulness in her actions, a visible effort to regain a sense of integrity. She wasn't the same woman who had laughed behind my back, and in some ways, that was a relief. Then came the unexpected twist, the one I hadn't anticipated. One evening, as I returned from a late-night training session, I found a package at the door. No note, no name, just a small box wrapped neatly. Curiosity and caution warred within me as I opened it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, filled with pages of handwriting. Hers, unmistakably. She had documented everything. Every moment of guilt, every hesitation, every realization of the consequences she had ignored. But more than that, she had written about me. Not the confrontation, not the public exposure, but the man she had once betrayed and the respect she still held deep down for me. There were admissions I had never heard aloud, confessions that revealed the depth of her remorse, and reflections that painted a portrait of someone grappling with their own failures. I read through it slowly, feeling a mix of vindication and unexpected empathy. This wasn't an apology designed to manipulate. It was raw, honest, and painfully human. The realization hit me hard. Betrayal changes everyone, not just the ones wronged. And redemption, when genuine, is messy, slow, and uncertain. That night, I confronted her, not with anger, not with blame, but with quiet questions. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I had to face myself," she said softly, her eyes steady for the first time in months. "I had to understand why I made the choices I did, and why I needed a change, not just for you, but for me." I nodded, the tension between us easing slightly. I realized that control, exposure, and revenge had been necessary, but they were only part of the story. True resolution required reflection, acknowledgement, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And as I closed the journal, I understood something vital. The storm I had unleashed had not only humbled them, but had revealed something about myself. Strength isn't just about dominance. It's about clarity, patience, and the ability to wield power responsibly. The final confrontation wasn't violent, but it was decisive. I invited her to sit with me in the living room. The journal opened between us. The Karate Cop blogger had vanished from our lives entirely, publicly humiliated, privately broken, and fully aware of the cost of his arrogance. Now, all that remained was the private reckoning, the confrontation that would cement the lessons learned and reveal the truth about trust, loyalty, and consequences. "Alex," she began, but I held up a hand, letting the silence stretch. She was nervous, as if the weight of all she had done had compressed into this single moment. "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "Actions speak louder than words, and you've begun to show them." She nodded, a faint tremor in her hands. "I know I can't take it back," she whispered. "I only hope. I can prove I've changed." "Prove it," I said firmly. "Not to me, but to yourself. True change isn't demonstrated through words or promises. It's shown in decisions, in integrity, and in facing the consequences of your past without trying to hide them." And then she did something I hadn't expected. She smiled faintly, the first genuine expression of humility I'd seen from her. It wasn't relief or manipulation. It was recognition, acknowledgement of her mistakes, and a commitment to be better. I realized in that moment that the real victory wasn't over him, the Karate Cop blogger. The real victory wasn't public humiliation, nor even the strategic dismantling of lies. The real victory was reclaiming control over my own life, my emotions, and my future. I had turned betrayal into clarity, deception into accountability, and arrogance into a lesson none of us would ever forget. She looked at me, eyes steady now, and said quietly, Thank you for showing me what I lost and what I need to become. And for the first time since discovering their affair, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not joy, not relief, but a quiet, measured understanding that I had faced betrayal, orchestrated justice, and emerged not just intact, but stronger. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly regained a semblance of normalcy. The Karate Cop blogger was gone, his public persona shattered, his ego in pieces. She had changed, visibly, quietly, and I continued to observe the subtle shifts in her actions, the care in her words, the effort in her gestures. Yet even as life moved forward, a lingering question hovered. Could trust ever fully return once it had been shattered so completely? Then came the final, unexpected twist, one that neither of them, nor even I, could have predicted. One afternoon, as I returned from a solo training session, I found a small envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a simple note, and signed with only one line. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't with others. They're with yourself. It hit me with the force of truth. I realized that while I had orchestrated a storm that humbled them both, the true battle had been my own. Anger, betrayal, the thirst for revenge. It had all been a test, a crucible that forced me to confront my limits, my restraint, and my capacity for measured justice. The storm I had unleashed wasn't only theirs to endure, it was mine to navigate as well. I sat down in the quiet of my apartment, the city lights reflecting softly through the windows. For the first time, I allowed myself to reflect not on the anger, not on the humiliation, but on the lessons learned. Patience is more powerful than fury, truth more devastating than lies, and self-control more vital than strength. I had fought battles without throwing punches, taught lessons without raising my voice, and reclaimed not just respect, but clarity, dignity, and purpose. And as I looked out at the night, I understood the ultimate truth. Betrayal can shatter lives, but it can also illuminate paths to growth. Revenge can wound, but it can also teach, if wielded with precision. And sometimes, the most profound victories are not in the storm you create for others, but in the calm you find for yourself afterward. The Karate Cop blogger would remember that day forever. She would remember the consequences of her choices. And I, finally, would remember that even in the darkest moments, there is strength, strategy, and the unshakable power of standing firm, knowing that justice, when executed with patience and precision, leaves an impact far beyond what brute force could ever achieve. The storm had ended. The lessons had been learned. And life, though scarred, moved forward with a clarity and strength I had never known before.